And I think that a lot of guys don't overcome PE, not because their body can't, but because they lack the consistency, and they try it a couple times and it doesn't work. So then they just stop, right? Kind of like what you used to do, right? You tried some things and you were like, this doesn't work for me. Like, forget it. Or this is like too embarrassing or uncomfortable to like confront even with myself. So I'm just going to ignore it or not think about it. So yeah, I think you got to such a good point of consistency that showed you, what was possible. Welcome to What I Love About Sex, where some incredible guests and I, Steph Kanowski, will be bringing you the tools for improving your sex life with topics such as sex issues with your partner, sexual self-confidence, premature ejaculation, sexual shame, masturbation, sharing your fetishes, orgasmic pleasure, and more. Sex is still so taboo, and I personally believe that by improving our understanding and communication skills around sex, we can enhance our own self-pleasure as well as deepening our long-term romantic relationships. So listen in, try to stay open-minded, and let's get started. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode on the What I Love About Sex podcast. I am so excited to get this episode out because I am actually interviewing one of my clients, Charles. When Charles came to me, he was struggling with PE, or premature ejaculation, and he has overcome it in the months that we worked together. This is a really great story for you guys to hear, those of you especially who are struggling with PE and you want some more perspective, you want to hear into the tactics that Charles had used during our time working together, and all around, it's just a great episode. So can't wait for you to check it out. I'm also really excited to announce that I am releasing my own PE course for you guys to help you overcome PE. So the PE course will be released January 30th. And the waiting list is in the link in the description of this episode. So if you're interested in the course and you want to get the details, definitely join the waiting list as soon as possible and you will get those updates. All right, Charles, thanks so much for coming on the show to do an episode on your experience with my coaching. I'm really excited because you're the first one who I've ever done this with. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Of course. Getting right into the questions, let's just start with, can you describe in more detail the specific symptoms of premature ejaculation, or PE, that you were experiencing before seeking help?
So whenever I would have sex, just like regular intercourse, it would be like max 30 seconds that I would last before I would ejaculate. It wasn't always tied to like an orgasm. It was just something that would happen on its own.
Okay. So around average of a 30-second mark?
Yeah, I would say at the most.
What else? What other like symptoms were you experiencing with that?
Physically, that was pretty much it. It was really frustrating, to say the least, that was how things always ended up. But if I was getting a blowjob or a hand job or something, it would always last longer. It was only during like regular intercourse that I had trouble with PE.
Yeah, which is most guys too. How long were you struggling with that, where you were at that 30-second mark for penetration?
Oh, years. I don't even know. Pretty much the whole time that I've been sexually active. So over 10 years.
Did you ever do anything before coming to me to resolve it?
I tried different condoms and some of the numbing gels and creams that were on the market, but I never really had very much success with any of that.
Why do you think that wasn't successful? Because I know there's a lot of guys listening who are going to be like, yeah, I tried everything too. It just doesn't work. Like, what do you think it was that made those tactics not work for you?
I think probably because it was more than just a physical problem. Like some of it was mental also. That just trying to rely on like something to block the sensation didn't really take care of everything.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What about your relationship? Like how this frustration that you were having and being that, it only happened during penetration with your wife, like how was this affecting your relationship?
My wife never had a problem with it. If she did, she never told me. I always apologized for coming too fast, and she always said it wasn't a problem and not to be worried about it, but it still bothered me. And I think that was the biggest impact on the relationship, was that I just felt I was insecure about it, and I didn't feel like I was up to par sexually to please my wife if I was going to come that fast all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember you telling me, because obviously I know the answers to these questions. I just want the guys to hear, your point of view. But yeah, I feel that most partners are pretty good with it. It's not really the issue so much of the woman like having a negative reaction. That's very slim. The majority is the guy thinking that she's thinking something she's not, right? And then you get all in your head about it even more. But yeah, from like your experience, there definitely was some mental setbacks along with that physical one that just kept feeding into one another, right?
Yeah.
Do you think it was just the fact that you didn't work on any mental ways to help you at this point? Or do you think it was also a matter of maybe not being consistent with some of the things that you did try?
I think it was definitely both. I wasn't consistent with the things that I had tried physically, and mentally I was just pretty much lost with everything.
So the actions you've tried, you pretty much said it was like, let's say those again. You tried some gel numbing creams.
Numbing creams and gels, and then like just different kinds of condoms. Just trying to find like maybe ones that were thicker so that there would be less sensation, or ones that had like the numbing gel in them already. And I just never had any luck with any of them.
Did you try anything else? Any other tactics, like any masturbation tactics, or like
some
meditation?
Masturbation tactics, but I didn't notice that the masturbation was helping anything.
So what was it that made you realize you wanted my help? Like what made you feel like, all right, it's time to like try something new, or it's time to work with Steph? Like, what was that? What created that shift?
I would say probably over a year ago, I had considered looking into finding like a sexual psychologist or something like that local in the area that I could talk to and see if that would help. And I didn't really want to find somebody that I would have to risk running into like at the grocery store or something like that. Yeah. And so I pretty much just kind of brushed it off. And then your reels kept showing up on my Instagram feed. And after a while, I just started following your account. And then you brought up starting the Let's Talk Sex Club. And so that was when I decided I could give that a shot and see, like baby steps into getting help from somebody else besides just trying to find things on the internet.
Mm-hmm. So I was like the first one you came across that was like this third party outsider that you're like, I'll never bump into her. Like, I'll never, like was it mostly that? Was there anything else about the content that like drove you to kind of trust that route, at least a little bit?
Probably that your page was geared specifically toward men. I think that had a pretty big impact on it too.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's get into the tactics we did together. And I feel like we use the same tactics the majority of the time that we worked together, yes. Right? Would you say it was like mostly the same repetition of the same types of exercises?
Yeah, definitely.
Which ones? Yeah, go ahead.
So the first thing I tried, maybe even before I started meeting with you in the group or one-on-one, was the Promescent spray. And so I tried that a few times and kind of had to play around with how many sprays to apply so that I wasn't just like completely slam the door on my dick numb, and also like not sensitive enough to really have any kind of problems. And that really helped out a lot. And then as we got further into our conversations, like the other things that we tried, like slowing down physically, that was the one that I think probably had the biggest impact with promescent and without. Like I felt confident either way that just slowing down, I would have a better outcome in my sexual experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember after like week one of doing that, you saw like a noticeable difference, and you were like, "Holy shit!" It was so easy and simple.
We were. It was one afternoon on a weekend, and I had to go run some errands. And my wife was like, "Hey, do you want to have a quickie real quick before you head out?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." And it ended up going for like 15 minutes. And after probably like the first full minute, I just thought to myself, I can't believe that this is still happening. And the only reason that I finished in the end was because I thought that she had already come. And so I was like, well, if we can't just stay in here all afternoon, like I got stuff to do and we don't want the kids to walk in. So yeah,
that's so funny.
That was the first time that everything kind of just clicked on its own.
When did that happen? How long into working together did that happen? Do you remember like a time frame?
I want to say it was probably 4 months.
Mm-hmm. That sounds about right.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it takes some time, but it's worth it.
It takes some time, but what you were so good at was the consistency of doing the same shit over and over and over, right?
Yeah.
Like, and we'll get into like the specifics of like what the same things were, but you were just so disciplined. And I think that what a lot of guys lack is that discipline of just, hey, I'm going to do it every single week. I'm going to do it regardless of getting the exact result I want. I'm going to do it. I'm going to find whatever came from it. I'm going to learn and do it again, and that's what you were so good at. And I think that a lot of guys don't overcome PE, not because their body can't, but because they lack the consistency and they try it a couple times and it doesn't work. So then they just stop, right? Kind of like what you used to do, right? You tried some things and you were like, this doesn't work for me. Like, forget it. Or this is like too embarrassing or uncomfortable to like confront even with myself. So I'm just going to ignore it or not think about it. So yeah, I think you got to such a good point of consistency that showed you, what was possible. And it's actually funny too. I'm laughing because the time when your wife's like, you want to have a quickie. And then in your mind, you're like, all right, slow down.
Yeah.
Like,
in my head, I was thinking like, this could last longer and also still be a quickie. I didn't think it was like, hey, like the kids are gonna have to turn on another show.
It could actually be a long session.
Yeah. So.
And she wasn't even done yet, so you could have kept going, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, she fooled me on that one. The first time that she ever had to, she didn't have to fake an orgasm, but that I thought that she had one, and so I just kind of gave up, and she wasn't even there yet. But another thing that also helped with me being consistent and trying the things that we talked about was at the same time that I was coming to you for help with premature ejaculation, I was also trying to work with my wife on having sex more consistently. Like before, we would just get busy with life and we would go weeks sometimes without having sex. And then we made it a point to like have sex once a week. And sometimes I push for more than once a week if I'm lucky and I can pull it off. But that also helped a lot in being able to be consistent.
Yeah. And I think what was also consistent in regards to that were conversations with your wife, right? Like we were getting an idea of like, what are her brakes and what are her accelerators? Like what's going on in your wife's head? Like, what does she want? What does she really appreciate about your sex? Like you were having these conversations with her too, to increase that frequency. And that fed into the whole process. So yeah. What do you think allowed you or helped you be consistent? Like what was going on in your head that made you stick to that, to all the things we talked about and just stay on top of it?
Probably that I saw small improvements along the way. It wasn't like I would go for a long stretch with everything being the same. Like the more that I worked on things, like the better they got each time. And that really helped.
Yeah. The small wins, right? Like at the beginning of every call, what did we do first? We were like, what's the wins? Right. And we went over like what went well in the last week or the last 2
Exactly.
weeks that like you felt good about. And sometimes it was the smallest thing, right? Like sometimes it wasn't that big of a deal, but it still was something that made you feel like progress, cool,
Yeah.
growth, progress. What happened after that experience where you had that quickie that was actually pretty long, a long sex session? Were you able to have longer sessions after that experience, or were there dips and flows in terms
There
of?
were definitely dips and flows. I knew after that happened that that wasn't going to be the norm every time. I hoped that it would be something along those lines, but I think like the next time we had sex after that, it was another like pretty quick event. It definitely wasn't as long as it had been at that time, but I just kept trying the stuff that we talked about and continued to see results from it.
Because I remember this, but because I also remember you saying like it was nowhere close to as long as the last time was, but it also wasn't as short as the times before.
Right.
Right. So that in itself is like this mental reframe of like, I'm not going to tell myself I'm moving backwards.
Yeah.
Let's just see like where the general, like where I generally am. I had a great experience that was a little out of the ordinary, but I'm still seeing progress like generally. And you focused on the progress versus, oh shit, I'm back to where I was,
Yeah.
So it was a way you mentally processed it that was helpful.
Yeah. And another thing that we changed up in our sex life was we tried different positions, and I think that helped a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
It helped. I think the biggest change that I saw was that the pressure that I would feel with penetration changed a lot from the missionary that we'd done before to like the new positions that we tried out, and I think that helped help me last longer. Also,
What about that do you think helped you last longer?
I was probably more relaxed,
Mm.
and so it helped me to slow down more.
Mm-hmm. Another tactic you did consistently were Kegel exercises,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you were really on top of that just about on a daily basis, correct?
Right. I followed your suggestion to set an alarm on my phone, and it goes
Yeah.
off still every day at 1 o'clock.
Are you still doing them?
So yeah, I still do them
Good.
every once in a while, a few times a week for sure. But
Amazing.
I just never turned off the alarm.
How helpful do you think that was?
It's helped out a lot. I don't. At the beginning, I noticed a lot of improvement from it. I feel like nowadays I don't see that much. Like it's not something that continues to feel like it builds up too much, but I think it definitely helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think maintenance is good too.
Yeah,
Regardless of seeing a drastic change, you can only get so far in terms of a drastic change, and then it's just more maintaining it and understanding that it's always a tool you could go back to if you need to.
yeah.
But that's good. Another tactic that I would like you to kind of share your experience about, because it's pretty unique to the sexology world of what coaches are telling people to do, was the visualization within the masturbation sessions.
So that was probably one of the things that of all the things that we tried, I probably did that the least. But like visualizing sex with my wife and using that time like to understand the feelings that I would feel leading up to ejaculation and how to control that. That really helped out a lot too.
Yeah, I remember you saying how you learned from different visuals of like, hey, like this inspired me to try this, or like, it kind of like created this confidence of what you're going to do in the next session, or like what feels good to you, or like what excites you most. So it is something that does take the most effort, which is why it's hard for guys to keep up with that, because it's kind of mentally draining a little bit, right?
Yeah,
It's like mentally tiring. You're used to just jerking off to porn. It's super easy. You don't have to use your mind for that. So to use this, it kind of brings you into this whole intentional place of focusing and creating your own arousal patterns and kind of building a new habit. So it definitely takes more time and more effort, but you were still super consistent with it. I think at least 1 to 2 times a week you did it.
yeah. I was probably doing
Yeah.
that once or twice a week.
Yeah.
Another tricky thing about that was like finding the time
The
that would
kids
be
and
good to do that, because that's different than like sitting in a chair and doing Kegel exercises. Like,
yeah, nobody
obviously it's way
knows.
more physically involved.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
having to work around that made it a little bit more difficult, but um, it was definitely something that I did, and I feel like I gained.
Yeah, because one of the first things I said to you on like one of our first calls was you're not having sex enough. Like you're not experiencing not just sex, but also masturbation. Like it's like,
Mhm.
okay, it's about the reps, right? Do you remember me saying that? Like we need to get in
Yeah.
more reps of understanding like how your dick works, how your mind is working in relation to your dick and to your sex life. So to put in those reps is something I always have my clients do early on, because you need more experiences to get an idea of like where your brain is going during that arousal state. So I think, yeah, that was helpful. And I think it was also putting you more in the mindset of sex, which allowed you to have more conversations with your wife and increase the frequency there. So yeah, everything kind of got packaged in together. Would you say that the process was ever overwhelming, knowing that you were actually doing a few things consistently?
No, I never felt overwhelmed with the things that I was trying to help overcome PE.
Why do you think you weren't overwhelmed? Because you were, like I said, you were pretty on top of like a few different tactics every week, which wasn't in your life before working with me.
Um, Probably because except for the mindful masturbation, like everything else is fairly like a quick thing to take care of. Like, how long does it take to do Kegel exercises? Not very long. Like, you don't have to set aside a lot of time to do that. Like, you can do it while you drive down the road. It doesn't really matter. So I think that the fact that it wasn't something that you had to devote like hours to a day or over the course of the week, a couple of hours, I think really helped out a lot in being able to be more consistent with everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, another one was the conversations with your wife, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
initiating different actions with your wife, different conversations. So you were also doing that, which does kind of take some courage if you're not used to having those types of conversations,
Yeah,
which a lot of people procrastinate on.
trying to work in more conversations about our sex life. It felt a little uncomfortable at first, but it got easier as we went on. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like as we got more consistent with having sex, um, it was easier for her to talk about also. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that had a pretty big impact on our sex life.
On the frequency, you guys talking about it more?
Yeah. And the fact that we set aside like a day every week that we were going to have sex, or just agreeing with each other that it was something that we would do once a week.
Mm. How did you feel initially bringing up this type of topic to your wife? Like, was that scary for you? Were you super comfortable with it? Were you like moderately comfortable?
I wasn't I wasn't scared of it. I just figured that she wouldn't take me very seriously. Like, she would just kind of blow
Mm.
it off. But as we had more conversations, it just got easier.
Was there ever a time when she got like annoyed with the sex conversations or showed a disinterest?
No, I don't think so. Other than me just flat out asking her if she wanted to go have sex, like she would get annoyed with that. But
Mhm.
just having just a normal conversation about it, she never really seemed to push back on too much.
How did you initiate these conversations? If you don't mind giving an example, like word for word what it would sound like. I'm just asking because there's so many guys who are like, I wouldn't even know where to start. Like they're kind of intimidated to initiate these conversations and get shut down.
Well, I would say probably the conversation we had with the biggest impact on where our sex life went from where we started was that I asked her one day when I was coming home from work if she was ready we called it Fuck Me Friday because it rhymed. And
I love it.
so I asked her, I was like, "You excited for Fuck Me Friday?" And she's like, Yeah, the only thing that bothers me is that it takes so long for me to have an orgasm. And so every time or most times we had sex, I would always make sure like to get her off before we had penetration or anything, so that she was never left out in the rain, so to say. But that was really the first time she'd ever said that it bothered her. So here we were, that it bothered me that I didn't last long enough, and it bothered her that she lasted too long. And so it kind of made it like for both of us to meet in the middle, I guess. That kind of helped with the conversations about sex.
Cool. Yeah, and she obviously felt safe enough to share that with you.
Yeah.
And that probably came from you first coming to her with being open. And this is a great example of vulnerability, which a lot of guys think is like, comes across as a weakness. Like, I'm sad that I can't come, like, boo-hoo. Like I feel like a lot of people see vulnerability as like this whining, right? When really it's like coming across truthfully as a strength and showing like your truth, but in a strong way. And that's what you did with your wife. You were like, hey, like, I want to improve this. This is something I want to get better at for the both of us. Like, how are you feeling about this? So it was a vulnerable, open conversation where you both kind of put each other at risk for not feeling so great, or at risk for being rejected for something, or possibly made fun of, in some relationships. So it was really cool to see you like open up to her, and then for her to feel like safe enough to do that right back. And then you guys solved this problem together. Last thing in terms of tactics I want to mention was promescent, right? Because that's something that we used for a bit in our strategy for you. So you take it away in terms of how you use that and how it was effective for you.
So the first time I used it, I used too much, and I definitely lasted longer, but it was also really awkward because I couldn't feel anything at all. And so I kind of had to play with, I guess, the dosage a little bit to figure out how much to use each time. And then each time I used it, I would try to use less. And so I think the first time I used like 4 or 5 sprays, and that wasn't helpful at all. So from there, I think I knocked it down to 3, and then I just slowly stepped it down each time that I would use it. But I didn't use promescent every time we had sex. It was at least like every other, or at most every other. Sometimes it would be like 1 time promescent and then 2 times without it. But our point with using promescent wasn't to become reliable on it, just to use it to help get to like the next step.
Yeah, which was slowly get off of it so that you can trust your own body more, right? And not need that little confidence booster anymore. Like, that's how I like to look at promescent, which, for those of you wondering if you haven't heard of it, it's a delay spray. And yeah, I think that my whole method with, all right, let's use it, 1 sex encounter intentionally, like actually use it. And then next time don't. And then the next time use it, next time don't. And I know there were a few times in the beginning when I was like, you didn't use it last time, right? And you're like, no, I did, because I didn't know when we'd have sex again. And I'm like, no.
Yeah. But once the sex became more consistent, then I knew that I could step off of the promescent.
Yeah, and you're like, all right, fuck this shit. I'm done using this. But that was really cool. That was really cool to see that journey, so to speak, of like, you starting off pretty like reliant once you realized it was working, and they're like, I should probably stick to this. And then it was just that reminder of, hey, we don't want to rely on it. Like, let's make sure we stay focused on getting off and seeing how your body feels when you're not using it. And then we'll talk about, what happened when you didn't use it. So that was a cool process that was fun to see, like getting to that place of success where you don't even need it, or you don't have to get it all if you didn't want to. Yeah. Anything else to say on promescent?
No, it worked for me. It was good stuff, but no, I don't have anything else on it.
Are you using it still at this point? Do you use it occasionally?
I still have some. Every once in a while I'll use it, just depending, I guess, on how I feel. But I only use like a spray, 2 at the most.
Yeah. And that's how I think, like, some guys will ask, like,
what if I just want to last longer for fun? And I'm like, yeah, use it. Like if if there's a time when you want to last a long time, then it's a great product to use.
Yeah.
Just everything in moderation is typically better. Okay. I mean, this question was, can you give any examples of how this has positively impacted your relationship with your wife? So you overcoming PE and no longer having that struggle. I know that the frequency has improved overall, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like communication has improved. Is that still on track? Like, just what are all the benefits here?
Yeah, we probably don't have as many sexual conversations as we did like when I was working with you one-on-one, but it's still something that I don't feel uncomfortable talking to her about. And probably vice versa.
Good. Do you still check in once in a while with each other?
Every once in a while, yeah.
Okay.
But I feel like we're just kind of riding along like where we've been, and everything's just kind of good. So
Good. Yeah. And if that frequency, ends up dipping, then you can have the confidence to go, ask her about it and see what's going on. So that's what's important, is to just keep that comfort level, right? Because the comfort came with the practice of the continued communication. So even just checking in, hey, how are you feeling about our sex life, is a great way to just get back in there and just, keep those conversations moderately going.
And even now, like, it's gotten to the point where if we miss a week for whatever reason, like, she'll say something about it.
Oh,
the next,
really?
like, getting close to like the next week around, she'll say like, hey, we didn't get to have sex last weekend. So yeah, that was encouraging, because before, like, she would never initiate or anything like that.
Yeah. I was just going to say sorry, I keep cutting you off. I'm excited.
It's crazy to think like I came to you just to work on premature ejaculation, but like it overflowed into everything else too. Because one of the things that I worked on, or that we worked on, as after she had said that it bothered her that it took her so long to come, was that I started trying to find a toy that she could use with us together. And that really helped out a lot too.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. So that was another thing. Finding a toy that she could use while we were having sex. That really boosted things too.
I love that. I love that she's actually like, aware, like, oh, we didn't have sex last weekend. Because I know that was one of the first things you came to me to say. It was like, she never initiates. I wish we would have it more, but like, I don't know what it's going to take for her to initiate more. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. For the men out there who are currently struggling with PE and looking for guidance, can you share any specific tips or strategies that you found particularly helpful in overcoming this issue that, maybe we didn't talk about, or maybe like the three major ones, like kind of like leaving the guys with like, hey, these are the three things that were most helpful?
I would say probably the most helpful one was slowing down. I think that had the biggest impact for me. That trying different positions, I think, was pretty good. And then I think probably the masturbation practice. Those three.
Besides those three tactics themselves, I would also like say that it's about the consistency and the mindset of using those tactics, right?
Consistency, definitely, with each one. You've got to want to see the change, and as you continue to do them, you'll see more changes.
Then the mindset, which you said is why you stayed consistent, was you recognizing the wins along the way. So the way that you looked at the process wasn't, oh, this isn't going to work, or, oh, this is really hard for me, I can't do this, or look, see, it's not working. Like, you were always looking at it from this frame of mind of like, all right, a little bit of progress. Cool. All right, that didn't work as well as this, so I'm going to try it again. It was the way that you saw it. So I'd say the consistency and the mindset, along with those three tactics, is in itself a good little game plan, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, what worked for you isn't going to work for everyone. It's about understanding yourself. a big issue was your lack of communication with your wife. Like that was one of the reasons you weren't having enough sex and you weren't masturbating enough because you were waiting for her, but then you guys weren't doing it. So the lack of masturbation was that problem that came from lack of communication. So we went back and fixed the communication. So, right, it has to do with your own lifestyle. So now you have this game plan that works for you, and it may work for other guys. Like if you're listening to this, this may work for you at least a little bit. I'm sure it will. But it's definitely about finding your personal game plan. So I think if you're open to that and you find someone you trust, like Charles trusted me, then it's good to invest in a solution, right? Because how long, you said for 10 years you've been dealing with this, right?
Yeah, 10 years or more. As long as I've been having sex, it's been an issue that I've struggled with. So,
and how long consistently are you lasting now at this point?
I've kind of given up on timing it, and I don't focus so much on lasting a long time as much as I do like trying to come when my wife comes, since we've figured out a way for her to reach her point faster. It's changed from trying to last as long as possible to, I guess, just like have the best sexual experience
for what works with you guys.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, because I think part of the problem with PE is that obsession with the time frame, right? And the obsession with like, oh, it's only been this long, which of course is a problem if you're not enjoying yourself because it's too short and you're not able to even get to the being in the moment because it's too short. Like that's a problem. But for you to obsess over, the length of time isn't the best way to go about it. So I like that you're like, hey, what works for me and her, and what are we both happy with? And that's the ideal time frame. How would you say in terms of like foreplay and penetration, like how long is sex for you guys typically?
Oh, at least 30 minutes, probably longer. But most, like 95% of the foreplay is just focused on her. I enjoy it that way. Like I'm not looking to, I don't need a whole lot of foreplay, We have foreplay as long as she's comfortable with it, and then she'll tell me when she's ready, and so we'll change it up then. But definitely sex has become more enjoyable from the work that I done with you, like identifying everything between me and my wife. Instead of feeling like she wasn't enjoying any of the sex because I was coming too fast, like we found a way for her to enjoy the sex at the same time that I was enjoying it. And before, when I would come real fast, like we weren't even having sex long enough for me to enjoy it. And so that definitely changed. Like it got to where we were both getting the same kind of enjoyment out of the sessions that we had.
I want to ask you, because I know there's a lot of guys who are like, well, let's just say they get so turned on by their woman getting turned on, and that triggers their PE. Was there ever any certain type of thought that helped you to not get too excited, even by giving her pleasure, even if you weren't penetrating?
I think I just repeatedly tell myself just to slow down. I tried like trying to think about baseball or sports or whatever or anything else, and that never worked for me. Like I could think about it all I wanted, it didn't matter. But I think probably focusing the thought more on myself and what I was doing at that time probably helped more than trying to think about something completely unrelated to what was happening.
Yeah. And that's a really good way to be present. Like I always remind guys, like if you're getting too like distracted or nervous about what she's doing or what she's thinking, like get back into your body. And sometimes it's a matter of like, all right, what am I doing? Like what part of my body feels best right now? Or like, even when you're masturbating, like, and doing the visualization, like, what are you doing to her in that visual? It shouldn't be all about her all the time, because that often builds up a lot of anxiety. Right. So are you at the point where maybe it's like a few minutes of you being able to control it? Like, how do you feel in terms of control?
Yeah, it's definitely a few minutes. I would say probably 5 minutes. So
Nice.
I try not to just be a clock watcher about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's good. I'm glad you got out of the habit of like the timing. I think it's good to do that in the beginning to have awareness, but you don't want to live your life on a clock.
Yeah.
When you're getting off. But that's great. And 5 minutes is the average time frame. So it's interesting to see like a lot of guys assuming that women want sex for like 40 minutes to an hour when the majority of women do not want that. It's like that much penetration is just way, way too much. Our body can't handle that for the most part. So yeah, 5 minutes is really the sweet spot of penetration. So it's cool that like, you don't even have to think about, timing. You don't have to, you're not in your head, you're actually enjoying it, and you're enjoying it because you're able to see her enjoy it, and you're focused on your body too. It's not just all about her. So a lot of good stuff. Cool.
Yeah. And not only like seeing her enjoying it, but knowing that she's actually enjoying it. Like I know that she's not faking.
How do you know that? Like for guys who are like, I'm not sure if she's really enjoying it or not, like what would you say to them?
I think that if she wasn't enjoying it, she wouldn't be so vocal about it. And she wouldn't ask, like every time we get ready to have sex, she's like, get my toy. And then I know like it's game on for her. So plus
she's finally initiating, which she didn't used to. So
yeah,
you know that it's gotten better for her. I love your wife's communication and love for you, because that was cool to see too. Like you guys immediately just like picked this up as a team, like she was down to do this with you and just like figure out things and try things. And that's just great. I hope you appreciate her for that and that you tell her.
Yeah, definitely. And she had suggested, even before I'd ever heard of you or like your services or anything, but she had talked before about like scheduling sex. And I thought she was joking. I was like, there's no way that A, you want to schedule sex because you hate having sex, and B, that just sounds weird. Like who is going to, like, you going to put that in the calendar, or are we just going to have an agreement that every Friday we're going to have sex? Because I don't think you're going to hold up to that. You won't hold up your end of that bargain. Like I'll be there every Friday, but you won't.
I'll be there waiting.
Yeah. And luckily, as we started scheduling it, so to say, like both of us were there, like mutually, like we knew that was what was coming. So it helped out a lot.
Is that where Fuck Me Friday came from?
Yeah. It's flowers, fajitas, and fucking. I pick up flowers on the way home from work. We have fajitas for dinner. And then later on. Yeah.
I love that because you're making scheduling sex like cool and fun versus what so many people think it to be, which is like lame and stupid.
Yeah. So we have that, great. The 3 F's of Friday.
3 F's.
You name it.
Oh my God. That sounds great. Awesome. Charles, is there anything else you want to add about your experience or the challenge you overcame?
I highly recommend people like seek out help. If you're uncomfortable about it, after a couple of times, like you'll be fine. I felt uncomfortable sharing it at first, and the more we met up on our Zoom calls and stuff, like the more comfortable I got talking about it. And don't be scared. It's definitely different talking to somebody about your sex life and having to be so open about it, but it's worth it.
Totally. Just like you're building a skill set, just as you build the communication skills with your wife. You were a great client, always showed up, always stayed consistent, addressed all concerns that came up, and that's what allowed you to get through this. And yeah, I'm so happy for you. Loved working with you, and I appreciate you for coming on and sharing your story.
Yeah, I had a great time working with you also. I always look forward to our calls. It was great.
Love it. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
I hope this episode helped you. If it did, I would love for you to leave me an iTunes review. It would mean the world to me. You can also screenshot your favorite episodes and tag me on Instagram @StephGanowski. And before I go, remember, your sex life is as good as you make it out to be. Until next time.